straight from the Mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Well, Matt, we're back.
You weren't sure if it was going to happen, were you? You don't sound confident there.
Look, I must admit, you always have a little bit of slight doubt, I suppose. You're never quite sure. You can never back everything 100% in life, can we? But congratulations, you're been reinstalled back as the mayor again,
Well, thank
which
you
is
very much.
wonderful.
Well,
But you know,
I had a driving ambition because you don't want to be stuck one run off a half century or one run off a century.
I know where this is going. This is exactly what I was about to say. I would hate to have finished on 49. I'll let you explain further.
Well, we were on 49 podcasts
That's
last
right.
week. That was our 49th. And so, it'd be a bit like Shane Moore, wouldn't it, getting out on 99 off a no ball.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I thought I'd better make sure I get back in as mayor just so we can continue on, at least do our 50th one now, which I'm pretty impressed with.
Hey, today is our 50th. We should break out a bit of cake and share it amongst people and sort of stuff as well. So,
Well, something like that.
well done on getting the mayor's job again, and well done on our 50th podcast. So
Yeah.
great job.
Yeah,
So
no.
talk us through, mate. The other night, Thursday night, how did it all go anyway? What was the voting?
So we had two people standing for both the mayor's position and the deputy mayor's position.
Right.
And it's interesting because you can do the mayoral election, which has got to be done in September at the mid-term each council term. Now, this is a bit different, this one, because we've got 4 years as the council term normally.
Yes.
This term is 2 years and 9 months approximately. So we had 1 year and 9 months approximately for the first term.
Right.
And then this middle term will be 1 year. So it had to be in September, and that's across the state. The 93 councils across the state that have their election as a mayoral election amongst the councillors have to do it in September, had to do it in this September.
Yep.
Of those, obviously, you go through the process, and so the process is interesting. So I start off the meeting, and I'm chairing the meeting, as you normally do.
Yes.
But then it comes to the election. Obviously, it would be a little bit biased if you ran the election yourself. So I've got to hand over to the CEO, who then goes through that process, takes nominations.
Yep.
So Councillor Josh Black nominated, I nominated, obviously.
Just the two?
Just the two, yep.
Yep.
And you have to be nominated by a couple of councillors, and so that process goes through. But then one of the interesting things is that you can choose the method that you use to elect someone.
Okay.
You can choose...
I was sort of thinking, do you want to do like liturgical dancing sort of thing, or do you do that sort of thing?
maybe we should think about that. It's probably a little bit more technical than that. But you've got three options.
Three options, okay.
You can do it by open ballot. So
Right.
that's one where you just basically put your hands up. And that seems like, I think anyway, the best way to do it, but not everyone does that way. And I've been involved in other ways of doing it, because the second way to do it is where you do it by secret ballot.
Right.
And a secret ballot, as the name suggests, you
Yep.
basically just write down names on a piece of paper, or you have names you tick on a piece of paper there, and then they're counted so no one knows who votes for who.
So it's an open ballot, hands up. Is that the
Open
type of
ballots,
thing?
hands up, like every other vote of council.
Okay.
And so the third option is preferential. So that's secret ballot again,
right.
but preferential. Now that's,
How do you get preferential with two?
well, you don't, and that's irrelevant when you've only got
Yeah,
two.
that's right.
So then it comes down to a decision. And let me say that they're all methods of voting are preferential. So, for example, if you had three people stand, you have a vote, whether it be open ballot or by secret ballot on paper. You do a vote, and say, for example, with 10 councillors, let's say the first vote is 4-4-2. The person that gets two votes is eliminated, then you do another vote. And then obviously the vote goes from there.
Yep.
So if you do it via open ballot or open show of hands, or if you do it by secret ballot, it's a multi-round affair if you've got more than two people standing. If you do it by preferential, it's only one round and you've got a number, and then the preferential process has got to be counted. You get the same result because preferential is essentially the same as you get in the other two methods. One thing that surprised me one time back very early in my council career, we had a vote and there were three people standing for a particular position. And you think, well, it's obvious that someone's going to win the vote if in the first round someone gets more votes. So, for example, there were 11 councillors back in those days. So let's say, for example, the vote was 6-3-3. It wouldn't have been that because it would have had a draw over a hat. So let's say it was 6-4-1.
Yep.
So the person with one gets eliminated, and in the back of your mind you're thinking, well, that person got 6. They'll obviously get it. But then the second round of voting might be different, and that's exactly what happened in that particular vote. I don't remember when it was. It might have been 2004 for deputy mayor.
Right.
But I remember a bit
The whole thing
surprised
changed up.
that when the second vote went through, it was 8-3.
Yeah, right.
And I've gone, hold on, there was only one person who got eliminated. Why wouldn't that vote have gone? What happened there? And I talked to councillors afterwards, and they said, well, the first round they were just eliminating one, and then the second round they were doing their real vote, whatever.
Yeah,
Sounds like playing silly games to me,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
whatever. So vote comes, and we've got the magic white bucket there as well. The CEO shows everyone the magic white bucket in case there's a tie. And you've got film canisters. So good old-fashioned 35mm film. The plastic canister, it's something that doesn't define the Local Government Act.
They put the votes in those.
Well, you've got to put the names in those if you're having to do a draw out of the bucket. So the first part, though, is because you've got more than one standing, the order has to be drawn out of a bucket.
Right.
So you put the names in. So Murray Wood, the CEO, put the names in the film canisters, put them in the white bucket. It gets shuffled around. Only two in there, so probably not a lot of shuffling. Put your hand in, draw one out, and then that's the name that's first on the ballot.
Sounds like Survivor.
It's a bit like that.
Do you have like a flame sort of thing, and they put your flame out sort of thing if you voted out? That's
Maybe
it.
we should introduce that.
Time
That's
to
a good idea. But it'd be nerve-wracking having the name out of the hat. And I just think there's no other option there, but it just seems like a really bad way to lose an election. I mean, with a pope being elected, they obviously just stay in there and keep going until finally they get a winner.
And the flame, sort of the smoke comes out from the chimney. There
Correct.
it is.
Yeah, that's right. With council, though, they say if you don't get a winner, you get a tie, you've just had the name drawn out of the hat. But you, first of all, eliminate other ones. If you've got more than two, lowest vote gets eliminated, then you get down to when there's only two. Obviously, in this one, we only had two. So there was Josh and myself. And then you've got, obviously, Josh, a member of the Labor Party. And one of the things that's interesting is the Local Government Act says you cannot make your mind up before you go into a council meeting. So if I'm sitting here talking to you and there's an issue coming up at council next week, I can't say to you, I'm going to vote a certain way. That's against the Local Government Act. That's against the processes that are in place. The idea is that you can't have heard all the options. You can't have heard all the debate. There might be things that come to you. So when you're committing yourself early, that's not the correct way to do it. So you can't have those discussions beforehand. It's got to be left to the meeting. And that applies to everything except mayor elections and deputy mayor elections.
Okay.
You can make your mind up beforehand because another important part is we also can't caucus. So you and I are a member of the ABC party. And before we go into a council meeting, we're both going to vote for this particular development. Let's agree to vote for that as members of our party. We're supporting the party. This is the way we're going to vote. That's against the Local Government Act.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But in a mayoral election or deputy mayor election, you and I can say, no, we are definitely voting for this particular person in this election. And again, if you remember the Labor Party, the expectation is that you'll vote for a member of the Labor Party if one stands for election.
Is that always been the case? Like, is this the sort of thing I always find frustrating at times about local politics, is they're bringing in state politics and federal politics into a local level. Is this something that we see more regularly happening here within Dubbo Council? Is that part of the issue?
Well, you never had a party-endorsed candidate stand for election or be elected until the 2017 election. So you had one Labor-endorsed candidate who stood and was elected, or you had more than one stand, but there was one elected. And then in the 2021 election, every ward had two, I don't think there's any more than two, but at least two stood in each ward as Labor-endorsed candidates. And we've now got three Labor-endorsed candidates. Now, I don't have a problem with that. That's democracy. I personally would prefer to see no party politics involved in local government, but it's a harsh reality of the world we live in. But in this particular scenario, those three, if any of those three stood for election, then their expectation for that party, I'm not an expert on the Labor Party, but the expectation, as I understand it, is that you will support one of your fellow comrades in that election process. And that's exactly what happened on Thursday night. We had Josh Black, a member of the Labor Party, standing. Vicky Etheridge and Pam Wells are both members of the Labor Party. So the vote went 3 votes for Josh and 7 votes for me.
Okay.
Same thing happened for Deputy Mayor. You had Richard Ivey standing for Deputy Mayor and Pam Wells, again, a member of the Labor Party. And the same 3 voted for Pam for Deputy Mayor and the same 7 voted for Richard for Deputy Mayor.
Right,
so that was it done and finished and over and done with. And then we moved on with the rest of the meeting. I took back over the chair after the elections had finished and then basically ran the rest of the council meeting as per normal. And everyone behaved themselves and did what they should do. There was no one spitting the dummy and throwing things on the ground.
So it wasn't like state politics, or it wasn't like federal politics where they have this so-called bear pit where there was aggressive commentary sort of thrown across the board?
I would like state and federal. In fact, let's start a campaign. I would love state and federal to look at the way most councils behave in a council meeting.
Yep.
Because in a council meeting, and even last night, obviously there could have been some tension, there could have been some people unhappy with outcomes, there could have been some people behaving badly. But last night, as with every council meeting that I've been involved with in this council, and really just about everyone I've been involved with my whole time in council, people stood up to speak about their issue. Everyone else stayed quiet. No one else spoke. They sat down. Someone else stood up. No one said, Mark Barnes is a complete idiot for what he said. They might have said, I don't agree with Mark's opinion or Councillor Barnes' opinion if you're a councillor on this particular topic. I think we can do this. And so everyone's very respectful. Everyone speaks about the topic, about the issue. They're not personally attacking each other. And they're certainly not talking over the top of each other.
No.
And that's one thing you do see in state and federal where people are carrying
absolutely.
on. And
what you're sort of explaining there, Matt, is there's a sense of decorum almost in the fact that there's a way that people go about this in a respectful way. So, Matt, why is that then the case in regards to state and federal? Because I'm with you. I think we should be starting something here to you watch the news at night and you see situation of our local member of the state level got kicked out the other day as well for a similar scenario whereby obviously I was suggesting the Speaker of the House has booted him out because of the fact he kept interjecting and over a question to one of the ministers in regards to it. Now, he may well have been right in regards to what he was saying, but the simple nature is the fact that seems almost to be allowed and acceptable, that you can do this. Yes, you get booted out, but you're allowed back in the next meeting in almost. Why is this the case in state and federal? What's your opinion on this?
so you talk about it being allowed and acceptable. I almost think it's expected. I actually think the parties have got a lot to answer for with this scenario because it's almost expected. Right, Mark, if you want to be a success in this party, you've got to get in there and show us what you're made of. Get in there and give it to the other side. And that's not really going to give you good outcomes. It's not good debate. And for the public when I'm watching, I just get frustrated with it.
Yes.
If you had a kindergarten class as a teacher that behaved like that, you'd be sending the students to the principal in kindergarten. And here they are, the leaders in our community. So I do get a bit frustrated by it. One of the things I find really good in a council meeting and council debate is that someone will stand up, they'll put their points of view forward, and they'll sit back down, and there might be other people sitting around the table that are really keen to have their say because they know that what that person's saying is so wrong and they want to put their opinion forward. But you can almost see people ready to jump up and talk, but they don't. They sit down, they let the first speaker or whoever's speaking about the topic finish their discussion, and then when it's their turn, and I keep an eye on all the members sitting around and people put their hand up, and I've got a little bit of paper in front of me to scribble down, right, Councillor Billy Bloggs is next and Councillor Mary Bloggs is after that. So it's in order of you putting your hand up to speak. And again, then, it's my turn. Now I can say, right, I don't agree with some of the things said
But
there.
you keep control over those emotions too, don't you? Like, I'd imagine if someone gets up there and starts to go off and gets makes a personal attack on one of the other aldermen or starts to become using offensive language or just starts becoming a bit irate, you have the position and opportunity there to turn around and pull that person in pretty quickly, don't you?
Absolutely right. And other councillors have that opportunity as well. They can call a point of order. It's something, if someone says point of order, the meeting stops.
Yeah, right, okay.
What's your point of order? And then I can make a ruling on that point of order. Now, if people don't agree with my ruling, so if, for example, if I've got one of my mates, in inverted commas, going off and talking about things someone calls a point of order, I can say, no point of order there because I'm trying to protect one of my mates. Hypothetical scenario here.
Yeah.
But then you can say, you can actually call for a ruling against, so you can actually have a vote of council against that point of order, against my ruling on a point of order. Yeah. Again, it's unlikely you're going to go that far, but a point of order, everything stops, let's rule on that. So if someone thinks that someone's maybe making some sort of defamatory statements or running another councillor down or a staff member, whatever it might be, everything stops there. But again, I really haven't seen that. I've only seen it from the public gallery. I've had a couple of times where I've had to stop someone from the public gallery and
That'd
say,
be almost
sorry.
like a hear sort of type of commentary.
No, that a little bit, but it's usually only one mention to say, please don't break out into applause or say hear from the public gallery. Yeah. And maybe they learn that from state and federal and think that's what they're meant to do. Right. But I've had a couple of times where someone's speaking in public forum and they've started to make some negative commentary around a council, around council staff, so I've had to pull them up there. But councillors, no, really, it's pretty much...
They keep the respect.
That's right. And I actually think standing up to speak and then sitting back down helps in that process because it means that you're standing up almost to show respect to your fellow councillors. Yep. And it's almost a bit like a corporate issue where you get handed when you've got a big corporate group and you get handed the talking stick. Whoever's got the talking stick can talk. Whoever's standing up can talk. Everyone else stays seated. Having said that, I don't stand up every time to talk as the mayor because you'd be up and down the whole night because you're talking constantly. And the staff who are only asked questions, asked information, they don't stand up to speak either. It's the councillors because they're debating. So the staff should be just giving some factual information because of the debate process with councillors. That's why they stand to talk. So again, went through the process, got elected, had the meeting, everything went along as you'd expect with the meeting, lots of good debate, and we move on.
Well, mate, look, the other thing is in regards to this, so you've now taken on the mantle and the role for the next 12 months in regards to as the mayor. I read with interest there your mayoral memo during the week, which outlined in fairly specific detail, may I say, the type of role of what to expect as a mayor. And a lot of this is incredibly time-consuming, apart from simply attending the meetings and going off and meeting other people and being involved in lots of high-level conversations. The amount of accountability to the general public is huge. You're accessible through social media, you're accessible through emails, you're accessible through phone calls. I read with interest just how many of these you do on a yearly basis. Just sort of update the listeners, let's just say, in regards to some of the type of things that's expected of a mayor these days from the point of view of accountability and how easily accessible you are.
So you're talking about the 2 or 3 people that didn't read my mayoral memo already?
That's right.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. There's probably only about a couple left, I'm sure.
That's right, just for those couple. I did actually write my mayoral column, number 90 it was, because I may not have been mayor after that. That gets published on Wednesday each week in the Daily Liberal and in the Wellington and District Leader. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, I'll write a bit of a summary because I was interested as well just to say where are these numbers at. I went through and just did a bit of a count on a range of things. And again, it was quite interesting. So 644 days I'd been in the position so from the election of mayor back in 2021 through to the 28th of September when the mayoral election was. So 644 days. And then I looked at some parts of the Act and how I might have fulfilled parts of those. One of my kids many years ago when I was mayor of Dubbo City Council was asked to do a PowerPoint presentation. All the kids had to do a PowerPoint on what their parents did. And so my daughter came home and said, I'm going to want you do, Dad. What do you do? And I went, that's a really good question. And she needed some visuals with it. So she found photos of me cutting ribbons and cutting cakes. So it was 90
Sounds like a pretty good job when you're walking around doing that sort of thing.
A 90-slide PowerPoint on cutting ribbons and cutting cakes.
This is my dad. He's the big fat fella with all that cake over the back there.
That's right. So obviously I do a little bit more than that. That's an important part of it. I didn't actually analyse that part of it. I didn't actually count how many ribbons I'd cut during the 644 days. But I did analyse a few things and I linked them back to the Local Government Act. Section 226 of the Act says the role of the mayor. And then I broke it down into certain parts. So part C of that says that the mayor is the governing body's spokesperson. So I think communication is vital. So I analyse that. I've done 509 radio, newspaper and television interviews.
Just in the last term, is it?
In the 644 days, 509 of those. I've done 49 at that stage.
49 podcasts.
Yes, that's right.
Now 50.
Over 60 hours of content in those.
Yep.
I've written 90 mayoral memo columns. So in terms of just those formal communications, there's a fair bit there. Then I looked at part M, and that says that the mayor, another role of the mayor, is to represent the council at various organisational levels. So I looked at that, and I looked at things like the Alliance of Western Councils, Regional Cities New South Wales, Regional Capitals Australia. So there have been 53 times over that period that I've travelled out of Dubbo to represent council on those various organisations or represent Dubbo at those various organisations.
Yep.
Part B says that it's important for the mayor to be focused on community cohesion, and I think a working relationship that's very positive with fellow councillors is really important.
Yep.
So I do one-on-one interviews with basically all the councillors. There's one councillor who doesn't have the time to do them, but I offer it to all councillors. And
you do that weekly or
monthly? Every month
Yep.
I have 8 councillors that we have booked in. And again, if someone's overseas or can't make it, so pretty
just a bit of a
consistent.
general chat, catch up and sort of see any concerns, how you're going, that sort of stuff? Or
I call it the 1 hour Seinfeld chat, a chat about nothing. It really is one of those things that you do sit down and say, what's happening? How are you going? What are you focused on? And sometimes some councillors say, I haven't got much to talk about this month. And an hour and a half later, we're still going. So it's really just important just to make sure I understand where each council's up to, what they're focused on, how I can help them, and vice versa. And it's a good opportunity for them to give me feedback as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
How am I going?
Yeah.
What am I doing wrong?
Well, it's relationship building as well too, isn't it?
Relationship building, that's right. Yeah. So I've conducted 120 of those one-on-one interviews with councillors over the last 644 days. And then also the Act in Part I says that you should foster partnerships between council and key external entities. So I've had 108 meetings with representatives from, say, government and some private sector organisations that are involved in council. And then engagement with the local community is in Part K of Section 226. So with that, we've reinstated the Community Leaders Breakfast, so they've been going well.
Yes.
We've got another one coming up on the 7th of October,
Excellent.
on Saturday morning, down at the markets, the farmers' markets. And then the Mayoral Developers Forums have been started up again. But also, I think it's really important to be accessible for the community. I advertise my mobile phone number, I advertise my email address, anyone can contact me, lots of people do. And I didn't realise how many until I actually did a quick count on my emails. So in that term, I'd received 18,163 emails.
Holy jeez.
And I'd sent 14,089 emails.
Now, I've read some of your emails. It's not like a bloke sort of goes, yeah, right. You know, like you're quite extensive in your responses. I'll listen to all of this, and I think to myself, you're a guy who you do put yourself out there, Matt. From the point of view of you're more than accessible. You've let everybody know the fact that this is how you can contact. I've read a lot of your responses to people through social media. You're always saying positive, and you always remain on the focus of what the real agenda is. There are people out there that do and have a pot shot at you. And I suppose it's the nature of leadership, isn't it? You know, there's always going to be those out there that aren't going to be happy. You've taken on this step again to go in to become the mayor for another 12 months. Does any of this get you down? When you're out there, you're putting yourself out at the time, you're doing some terrific things. Do you get sort of feeling as though, I just don't need all the negativity at times that sort of surrounds the role?
I'm actually okay with it. It probably affects my wife. Probably not so much my kids anymore. They're probably okay with it, but it probably affects my wife more than it does me. But it also affects fellow councillors. And one of the things that I find when I talk to councillors, sometimes in those one-on-one meetings, sometimes just in general, is the frustration that we all waste a bit of time on dealing with some of the negativity when what this group of councillors is really focused on doing is driving Dubbo forward. So I don't get down by it. There's a couple of things that I live by. One is when people speak ill of you, behave such that no one will believe them. And I really like that. I think
it's a great line.
Yeah, I think my sister actually said that to me many years ago, decades ago probably, and that's true. So when I see people saying some negative things, whether it be about council decisions or not understanding the process, sometimes people say, did you see the mayor's doing this? Well, it's not the mayor, it's a council resolution, and I take Part C of the Act of Section 226 very important. I think it's very important where I'm the spokesperson for the council. So when council makes a decision, whether I agree with it or not, I'm the spokesperson for that. So that's where I have a bit of a chuckle to myself sometimes when I say, the mayor's doing this. Well, actually, I didn't vote for that, but I've been speaking about that because it's a council resolution. So sometimes people don't understand the role of the mayor. So I don't get that down about some of those things. And the other thing, it was actually another councillor who gave me this little bit of advice, which I loved. And he said to me, when you see criticism, don't worry too much about criticism from people that you wouldn't ask for advice.
Oh, I like that.
And it's important as well. So you see criticism from people and you think, well, it's probably not someone that I'd go and ask for advice. Probably don't put a lot of credibility in their opinion. So if I see criticism, don't let it get to you. Don't let it affect you so much. As long as you know you're doing the right thing, as long as you're getting feedback from people about how you're going and you can see the results, to see the outcomes working, then you think, well, I'm still doing the right thing. And getting community feedback is important. But you're right, social media, and I didn't actually include in those numbers, that would have been a hard one to calculate.
Absolutely.
How many social media posts I've put up, how many, even phone calls. I didn't have a way of counting the number of phone calls. I looked at my call log. The call log doesn't go back forever. It only goes back a couple of weeks. And there were some days there where I might have been receiving 20 phone calls in a day. So you multiply that out, it gets to be a pretty scary number. But it's not every day that I get 20. There might be some days I only get 10. But, if you add it into that, the social media posts, the comments, I can't read every time I'm tagged in a social media post because I see my name come up in tags on all sorts of sites. I literally could not get to all of those. I always say to people, if you need me to take some action on something, then send me an email. If you want to have a pot shot at me, sure, go and put a social media post. I probably won't see it. I probably won't read it. If the idea is that you just want to have a bit of a vent and have a crack at me and expect me never to read it, never take action, go for it on social media. But if you really want some action to be enacted, if you want something to occur, you want me to follow up something, send me an email or contact me in a more formal method rather than social media, and you'll get some action.
And do so in a respectful way. Well, I think that's a fantastic overview for us, Matt. And look, well done again on getting the mayoral job, and congratulations on the fact our 50th podcast as well. Now, I notice here actually one of the first things that you had to do with the I suppose on Thursday night after being re-elected there as the mayor was the determination of the number of councillors for the 2028-2032 term of office. Now, I think going back to the last election, there was a localised referendum that we had to vote on as well in regards to the number of councillors, and also there was another part to that as well, which I've now since forgotten. Talk me through it. Are we going to keep the same number of councillors coming through? Are we going to stick the number of 11, or are we going to increase it to maybe, 13 or something? So
we are going to keep it at the same number. And just go back to refresh your memory, when we had the 2017, the first election after the 2016 amalgamation, the first election was 2017.
Yes.
And the state government dictated, because they can change this without referendum, they dictated that Dubbo Regional Council would exist, and that would have 5 wards.
Oh, the wards, that's right,
of
yes.
2 people. And so that was a decision done. The last council, and every council has to do it, every council I've been involved with has to do this. It might have changed slightly in the methodology and the process, but Section 224 of the Local Government Act says that council must determine the number of councillors for the following term of office.
So you do that after every new...
In every council term, you've got to do that.
Do it once.
And you've got to do it, you do it once, that's right, and you've got to do it basically before the last 12 months of council. Okay. So we had to do it this meeting. We could have done it earlier, but doing it towards the end of your term is normally the way you would do it. Now, when the Act says determine the number of councillors, it's not quite correct, because you can say how many councillors you want to have on council, but if you're going to change that, it's got to actually be approved by referendum as well.
So that's the referendum aspect of it. We get the people to decide.
Correct. In the last term of council, councillors made a decision to make changes to the makeup of councillors and the number of councillors. And so that went to a referendum. You may remember when you voted in 2021, on the 4th of December 2021, there was a referendum question which said, currently, Dubbo Regional Council is divided into 5 wards that elect 10 councillors in total. Do you favour abolishing this ward system in favour of a single area consisting of all voters that elects 11 councillors? It's a bit of a wordy question, but essentially, do you want to get rid of wards and have 11 councillors? And the community said absolutely. The question was declared passed with 74.59% in favour of that change. And so
we're getting rid of wards, aren't we, the next election?
Getting rid of wards.
Yep.
So then in this election that we'll have in 2024, there will be 11 councillors and there'll be no wards.
Yep.
Now, if we had have made a decision on Thursday night to change the number of councillors, or we could have also put out to referendum to change the method of election of the mayor.
Oh, okay. So, because of course, you mentioned this to us last week, that you could... at the elections, people could vote for the mayor as part of that. Is that right?
That's right. So there are 128 councils in the state.
Yeah.
35 of those have the mayor elected by a popular process.
See, I had no idea that was the case. I actually always thought it was always done by the aldermen in the council. It was never done by the people.
It has been in Dubbo. So since 1872, it's always been done by the councillors.
Right. So we've never had the other system.
We've never had the other system. Okay. But Orange, for example, changed over. I think it was 2 elections ago. They changed over to a popularly elected mayor.
Right.
And so we could have done that as well. As part of this decision-making process, we could have said, yes, we'll change the number of councils or leave the number of councils the same, and we would like to change the election of the mayor to be a popularly elected mayor rather than internally elected or elected by your fellow councillors. We discussed that, and there was a bit of discussion around the mayoral possibility. What would that look like? Would that be a good idea or not?
So there was some genuine debate and discussion about whether or not we go to a way that allows the people to vote on the mayor.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd go it was genuine debate around it. There was probably more questions. Should we do this? What do we think about this? Probably more along those lines rather than people arguing really hard one way or the other. I think in the end most councillors were pretty happy with having the mayor elected by fellow councillors. Yep. And a few advantages to that. You can have, the expression I've heard is lame duck mayor. You could have a mayor elected by the people So you go to a popular elected mayor and you have people stand. It's a separate election. You stand for election for the mayor, you get elected for the mayor. But that mayor is not very well regarded, for example, by the councillors. So you've got councillors who are typically going in one direction and the mayor, who they have no say over who the mayor is, going in another direction. So that's a problem.
Yep.
The second issue is that it actually turns the mayoral election into a much bigger spending event. At the moment, I love the democracy we've got. You don't have to spend a lot of money to be elected as a councillor. If you want to put in the hard work with just good old-fashioned boot leather, walk the streets, talk to people, mailbox drops. If you want to really put a big effort in, you can get elected for not a lot of money. And some people spend money and don't put the boot leather in and use advertising. So you've got methods available to you. But when I've seen mayoral elections happen for councils around the state, it tends to be a lot more focus on making it a big spend on that one position. You're not trying to be elected as one of 11. You're trying to be elected as that one.
Yes.
So you end up having more people spend money. So that means it's probably not as open a process for anyone to be the mayor. It's really only people that could afford to do it.
I could also see it as quite challenging too for people sitting down. If you don't know a person, and a lot of people don't know a lot of the council, let's be frank, when you're sitting there at the polling booth, there'll be people that you do know and there'll be a lot of people you don't know. So I really don't know how you can vote for someone to be a mayor that you don't know what their criteria is or credentials are and how they'd stand in that sort of capacity.
Well, that's absolutely true as well. The other part is that, and I actually preferred it when it used to be you put your hand up for mayor every year. It's now 2 years. So on a 4-year term, the mayor gets elected at the beginning of that 4-year term and then midway through that term. But with a mayor that's there for 4 years, that's it.
Sounds like a US presidential election.
It does a bit, doesn't it? Whereas at least with the other method, you've got a chance after 2 years, you might say, well, actually this guy or girl isn't working out so well.
Yeah.
Let's put someone else in that particular position.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, our state government, our federal government, do it in the same way. We don't really vote for Chris Minns or Anthony Albanese. We're voting for our own electorate, and then whoever forms government, out of their own that's in that particular party, they elect a leader of that party, which ends up being the Premier and Prime Minister.
You really are electing a working party of people, a group of people that are going to be able to work together to solve problems and look towards future planning and put some good decisions in place. And it's amongst those people that they will undoubtedly try to identify who they feel as though would be the best leader of their small little group.
And when you think about it, they probably know that person better than the public. The public might see one particular persona. Those people that have to deal with that person on a regular basis, they probably get to know that person much better. And in fact, after the 2-year time frame, for example.
Absolutely. So we've stuck with the 11. So we voted there, and it was 11's been the decision to go around again?
Correct. And again, it's a long process. If we wanted to change it, then, and personally, I would probably say 13's not too bad. But again, I wasn't going to go through the trouble of going from 11 to 13 because the next step is if councillors vote to change it, it then would go to a referendum in next year's election, so that adds extra expense to that election.
Yep.
And then it would mean that in 2028, the change would come into effect if the referendum comes out in the positive.
Right, okay.
So it's a bit of a process to go through. So you really only do it if you really wanted to and had something important like the last one. Absolutely support that, getting rid of wards and changing it to an odd number of councillors. That absolutely makes sense.
Now, this is a bit of a news item sort of come up here in regards to this because I wasn't aware of this. Something's happened here. There's been a rescission of land swap happened with the Dubbo RSL Club and Dubbo Regional City Council. I'm assuming here this is talking about the old Dubbo City Bowling Club site and the land swap that took place between that site and the site up there near South Lakes, I think. There was near that area. Is that right, up that way?
Yeah, on Keswick. But
on Keswick, sort of up that top point, isn't it?
Yeah, correct.
So take us back here, Matt, because before you get into what's actually happened here in regards to it, can you just talk us through, again, just for the listeners, what actually took place here? Because it looks as though now the RSL clubs turned around and said, okay, we want out of the deal, and they've been given the opportunity to get out of this deal. And so take everyone back. What actually happened here initially and what's happened now?
On the 28th of September 2020, so pretty well 3 years before the council meeting, which just happened on the 28th of September 2023, council resolved to proceed with a deed to effect a land swap arrangement with the Dubbo RSL Memorial Club, which transferred from the RSL Club to council the property at 74 Windy Warra Street, which is the old Dubbo City Bowling Club, is that
Yep.
what it was called? Dubbo City Bowling Club.
Dubbo City Bowling Club, I think it was, yes.
And we kind of called it the Greens, is what
Yep.
we've been referring to it as recently. So that property there, with that old building on there, and what was going to go from council to the RSL was 3.3 hectares of land within that southern portion of Keswick Estate.
Now, this was a straight land swap. There was no money transaction on this, was there?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, when I heard that deal, and I wasn't on council at the time, my initial thought was, we've given away something of value to get something that we don't necessarily need or want and have no business plan, no strategy for. That doesn't make sense. Why would we do that? And I am not a fan of land swaps in general because I just find it a bit convenient that 3.3 hectares of land up in a great development area just happen to be worth the identical amount as an old dilapidated building at 74 Winterborrow Street. I don't understand that. So anyway, I wasn't on council, so it wasn't my decision to make. They made that decision, and there were a number of things that the RSL club wanted council to do to affect that land swap. So again, you do the land swap, you think, well, that's it.
Was there a legal contract set out? So the fact that this was legally binding?
A legal contract, legally binding, with some conditions that council needed to meet. So, for example, council had to construct a road along the front part of that, so more expense to council. So now we're doing a land swap, again, getting something we didn't want or need and have no use for, and now we're having to pay out money for a road. There was some rezoning. So there were a few steps we had to go through, and there were certain dates on those. And if we didn't meet some of those, then certainly RSL Club could back out of that and had the ability to cancel or rescind the contract.
So if council didn't put the road in, then RSL Club could have backed out that deal because there had been a renege almost.
Something like that, and we had to still act in good faith as you do with any contract.
Yeah.
So there were some conditions we had to meet, a variety
Is that
of
normal?
conditions. Well, again, that's part of my frustration with this land swap. If you're going to do a land swap, or make it effective from today, why do you leave it in limbo and drag on? And then when this council looked at some of the parts of the contract in more detail, they were going to put in a temporary road out the front of the block of land for the RSL Club to build. And then as the whole area of Keswick was developed further, then that temporary road was going to be redone to a permanent road that was required for the feeding of that. And so this group of councillors said, well, why would we do that and spend money twice? Surely there's some wastage there. Why don't we just do the proper road? Sure, before we need it, but do the proper road properly. So we went back to the RSL Club and said, we'd like to do that road properly. They said, that's fine. So they were happy with that. That delayed some things a little bit. But in general, we continued on there. Now, the RSL Club did talk to us a little bit about some minor issues they had with some remediation. They had a report around some remediation because they'd had some work done by some of their consultants.
So when you say remediation, what are you talking about there?
Well, they found some rubbish under the ground in some parts of that, so you had to do something with that. And so they were going through a process.
Clear it out sort of thing, was it? Or?
Well, they had choices there, I suppose.
Was the expectation then that council had to do that, or was it the RSL Club had to do that?
Well, we had some discussions around that, and we certainly made it clear that that wasn't council's responsibility to do that. So they went through a process. I think they got to the stage where they thought this parcel of land isn't really exactly what we like. We hadn't met some of our deadlines, so they had the ability to rescind that. And so they sent us a legal letter, which is in our business papers if anyone wants to read it particularly. And they give 6 points to that letter, and some of that process talks about the conditions in the contract that weren't met, so they had that ability. And so if I read the last line of it, it says, we hereby give notice that the club exercises their right of rescission of the land swap deed. And again, if you had have bought the land, if they'd approached council and council had said, we'll sell you some land.
Yep. Here's a price.
The story that I've heard is that it was council that suggested the land swap deal, which I just don't understand at all. But if they had come along and said, we want to buy a parcel of land, and council said, sure, here's a parcel of land.
You got 30 days cooling off period, whatever.
That's right. We'll get a valuation done on that.
Yep.
Or we'll take it to auction to make sure it's a fair and reasonable open market price. Whatever the process is, if I'm about to hand over millions of dollars for a parcel of land, I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to make sure it's right for me. I'm going to get my reports in, and I'm going to then make that purchase when I'm comfortable with it. But because the land swap was in limbo and we had conditions to meet, it meant that you could back out. And whenever you're going to have the ability to back out, you might back out. There's one of my business rules in one of my books that I say, don't give yourself a back door. If you've got a back door, sometimes you take it. Now, in this case, they were going through the process, and again, there were some more expenses than they anticipated. So I get that from the RSL Club's perspective. If they had bought that land initially and then they had these other expenses that came along, they might have worked a way through it. They might have found some other consultants that maybe could work out a different way to deliver what they needed to deliver. But because they had the option to back out, sometimes that's the easy option. Oh, I'll just back out. That'll be easy. So again, it just hopefully, Mark, this is the last of the hangovers from the last council. The RSL Club is still keen to build up in that area.
Right.
The RSL Club has still said to us, if we can find some other parcel of land up there, then we'll look at that and we'll look at how it might
purchase
fit.
that.
And I did actually say council would certainly, the feedback I've had from councillors is that it would be unlikely to be a land swap deed.
Yep.
Me personally, absolutely, I'd be saying no to a land swap deed or land swap arrangement. But yes, we might have something there you can purchase.
Yep.
On the greens, we found a tenant, New South Wales Rugby.
Well, this is my next question, is the fact that the RSL Club can't now just move straight back into this area if they wanted this area, because there's already an agreement now, isn't there, with New South Wales Rugby?
So we've got a lease. Now, we had to get a sublease agreement because effectively...
What, a sublease agreement from the RSL Club to be able to lease out a land... Oh, this is just getting more complicated.
I know, and I didn't realise this was the case. When we were going to go out to lease this out, I just assumed that we own... I'd heard about this land swap deal, and I assumed that the land swap deal had been completed because it was years ago.
We control now this area of land, therefore we control who goes into it.
That's right. We own that, so we can lease it out. But as we went through the discussions, I found that we couldn't just necessarily lease it out to anyone. So, for example, if we put out an expression of interest, which we did, and someone said, yes, I'll move in there, please, I'm going to make it a bowling club, then we would have had to get permission from the RSL Club to do a sublease, and they
so
would
they
have
could have said no.
Well, it's their land, so they could have said no as to who went in. Yep. Now, again, the likelihood of a bowling club coming along and leasing that
I know what you're saying,
time,
but it just seems so silly that you got, who's the chief in charge, sort of thing.
Exactly
you got two chiefs there rolling. So does this place New South Wales Rugby in any danger of having to be moving out of this space, or are they okay there right now?
Well, I hope not, because I think the EOI that went out, I think New South Wales Rugby gave a good offer, and I think it's good for the community, and they were paying good money for it. So we've said to both New South Wales Rugby and the RSL Club, here's the lease arrangement. Yeah. Yes, they're basically taking back possession of it. They could cancel that if they wanted to, but I doubt they'll do that. They've got nothing they want to do with it immediately. They'll probably sell that block of land and sell that.
New South Wales Rugby's there for the next, at least 18 months or so, isn't it?
That's right. There was a 2-year lease that they had. They always knew it wasn't going to be a forever lease because they knew that at some stage we would plan some sort of strategy around that. And they did know it was a sublease arrangement. So we've gone through and explained that and been quite upfront with them all the way. But we weren't expecting to say, oh, sorry, you've got to now talk to the RSL Club. Again, I think those conversations will be fine. We've also got another community group in a very small part of that, and they were concerned about having to move out at some stage. And they will have to move out at some stage, but at least for the moment.
So is this land swap effective as from now, or is it a...
It's rescinded. It's done.
It's gone. It's gone. Okay, so...
That letter from the solicitors, that's as far as anyone's concerned from a legal perspective, they said quite clearly, we give notice that the club exercises their right of rescission. So once that was received, that was done. So it's rescinded, it's off, finished, done.
So New South Wales Rugby now has to, any issues, they now go back to the RSL Club, not through Dubbo City Council, Dubbo Region City Council.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's fine. Now, we also, what happened at the council meeting on Thursday night was that we also resolved to have a look at the green. So is it something we want? What strategic purpose will we have? Can we get a business case together? How much would we be expected to pay, or how much would be a fair price to pay for it? So we might end up buying that. But
so
again,
council could own it outright at some point in time down the future.
That's exactly right. And it might be one of those things where we do find a strategic purpose, but I'd be very disappointed whether it be a land swap, whether it be an outright purchase. You hope that someone has actually gone through and put together the process to say we need this.
A business proposal.
Something like that, because you're spending public money here.
Absolutely. One of the big things I suggest over the course of the next, 18 months, 2 years, that's really going to start to take off is this, the Northwest Urban Release, and it looks as though there's been a draft release of this proposed development area, and referring to it as the control plan. Now, this is going up on public exhibition for people to have a look at, and I know there's been some debate over certain aspects of this. On Thursday night, Matt, what was the discussion about? Has council signed off on this? Are they happy with what they're seeing?
So the draft Northwest Development Control Plan had been on public display. We received submissions. I met with some residents. There were some councillors that received various calls from residents. And so this was basically coming back to council to potentially be adopted or modified. Probably, and overall the plan, I think the community feedback was positive about the whole plan. I think the potential for this area is unbelievable. I think it's an exciting area.
Well, you've shown me the plans, and I've had a look at it myself, and it looks good. There's a lot of green space, which is impressive.
I love that part of it, and it's very close to the CBD. What a great bit of development to be occurring so close to the CBD. So lots of positives there.
So what were some of the objections?
So we received some submissions and certainly had some meetings with people who live on Chifley Drive. Chifley Drive is a lovely, quiet area. It's got 2 streets that you can access, Chifley Drive off Thompson Street, but it's a pretty quiet area, and there's one part in particular, one cul-de-sac area there that you'd probably have 5 cars a day. There'd be very few cars that would go there, so it is a really nice, quiet area. One of the things that's important for this whole northwest development area is that connectivity, walking, the ability to move around in that area is very important. That's part of the whole design principles. We're looking at best practices all over the place to see how we can deliver a really nice living area. The plans that we had out had some connectivity between the Chifley Drive area that exists and a walkway through to join up to part of this whole plan. And that's where some concerns or some residents in Chifley
So what were
Drive.
the concerns? Were they concerned about the positioning of the walkway, or were they concerned about the size of the walkway, or just simply having a walkway leading into their area?
Just a walkway.
Okay.
I think there were some concerns around some antisocial behaviour, about an area where people could commit crimes and then get away easily, even just some extra foot traffic that might come through into the Chifley Drive area. And so those concerns were heard by councillors. There was some discussion around those, certainly in various meetings that I've been involved with councillors and with various residents, etc. And eventually there was an amendment moved to the plan to actually close off that area. Now, keep in mind, this is a walkway, it's not a driveway, and it'll be a large walkway to try and minimise that potential of antisocial behaviour. You've got to weigh it up, getting that connectivity through versus the potential for antisocial behaviour. And in some walkways around Dubbo, we've actually closed off some that have been skinny, some that have been crime areas or maybe easy places to hide. Someone can steal something from a house and then hide in that walkway, looking around, waiting to see if any cars turn up, then running away. So all of those issues hopefully are addressed in the design of this, and it was certainly made quite clear that this was not about a road being put through there. It was definitely a walkway, even though it might be a fairly wide walkway. So all of that was interesting, but then an amendment was moved.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Was there a report, though, that someone stated that they felt that a house had to be knocked down to make way for this walkway? Is that true?
That's to make it a nice large walkway. There's a developer that's bought a house there, and if this all goes ahead as per the plan, then rather than have a little tiny skinny walkway, the idea from the developer would be to knock that house down, to have a nice open walkway with some nice treatment there, lights, that type of thing, to make it a safer and really...
So you talk about a house block size walkway then?
Yeah. It's probably that house block would probably, I'm estimating here, would probably be 20 metre frontage. Now, not the whole 20 metres wouldn't necessarily be the walkway. There'll be some nice design done around that. But it's not just meant to be a little skinny walkway, which is, I think, where some of that antisocial behaviour has occurred. And that's a choice for the developer. That's not council's choice. We're not saying this must be knocked down. You don't have to put that in. It's all about this master plan, if you like, of this area there. But I think the developer is keen to do that, and that would be allowed, again, going through the next steps, but in terms of the master plan, that would be allowed there. Again, an amendment was moved. We debated that. The amendment was to block off that and not have that walkway. All the rest of the plans, sure, adopt those, but just don't have the walkway there. And that was debated, went around, and again, good, healthy debate. In the end, councillors voted not to close it off, to leave it open as per the plans, and then the rest of those plans have now been adopted. So that's now the DCP, the Development Control Plan, for that whole northwest urban release area.
So that draft plan's now been signed off and sort of said, okay, we're happy now what we've got. So what's the next step? Do we now formalise this as a plan?
Well, it's formalised now as, if you want to call it, to make it simple, call it a master plan.
Okay.
So this is the big picture, and when you look at the plans, which are all in the council papers, you get an idea that you've got the roads and you've got the general blocks in terms of the large blocks, but it doesn't really drill down to the detail of each individual house block. Even if you look in the middle of it there, it's quite exciting. You've got a precinct there that's designed for a village square. So that might be some shopping, there might be a supermarket, an area that would have some central activities for those areas.
Yep.
Or for those things. And then you'd also have an educational precinct, and around the middle of that might be some medium density housing, and then as you fan out you might get to lower density housing. But you're right, the green space in it is quite impressive. So that's the big picture. Then developers, knowing that that's the big picture, the master plan, there are a number of developers that own different parcels of land in this.
This is interesting, because maybe you tell me about this, that you've got quite a few different developers in town are involved in this project. So this master plan, let's call it the master plan now, this is what the developers have to use then as part of the guise for their own development. Is that right?
The idea is that the DCP gives you the overarching guiding principles of what you should do in that area. Someone could say, I want to do something a little bit different here. It would have to go through a process, but you could do something a little bit different. Again, the concept is, here's the master plan, and there are different blocks of land owned by different developers in there. But if you do the master plan that covers all of those, then any development in any of those blocks should match the overall intent of the area.
Right, because council's already started development of this, haven't they? They've already started putting pipes in and things like that. Have they started to run yet, or is that sort of to happen?
Nothing at that level yet. And again, you'd hope that these developments would fan out from the closest connection where you've already got connections to some of those pipes, sewage pipes, water pipes, etc. It makes it a bit more difficult when a developer wants to skip over a bunch of land and start developing an area where you haven't got those connecting pipes, because normally you want to build out and keep fanning out because it makes it more cost effective to build all your underground infrastructure. Because
the funding's there, isn't it? We've got the secured funding for this, is that right?
Well, we've got some funding from the state government, from the previous state government, that gave us $9 million to help accelerate some of these. But the funding really would be, a developer comes along and says, we want to develop these lands, and they go through, there's more of a formal process to go through from here. But then as part of that, we would take contributions from those developers. We would then build the infrastructure that's needed for that. And again, it would fan out. So you're kind of working hand in hand. We're not going to put a bunch of underground water, sewage in. You're not going to put power in. You're not going to put NBN in, all of these services. You're not going to go and build roads until there's some activity from the developers there. And then as that activity occurs, you'll keep building those out. So you don't want to go and spend a lot of money putting all this stuff underground and then saying, that's it, we've done it now. In 20 years' time, that'll be developed. You're kind of developing it. You're putting that in infrastructure in the ground just ahead of where the development's up to.
Have we got any developers keen to want to get started on this? Is that sort of, I'm assuming now council's pretty keen now to want to start moving this forward. Is there any developer there that's turning around saying, hey, listen, I'm ready to go when you're ready to go?
I think there are some. I can't tell you definitively, but I think some of the developers who have been heavily involved in this planning process are pretty keen to get going on that. So there are steps to go through. The developers that are experienced with what's happening know some of these steps. So they'll go out and they'll look at how they start progressing the next parts. If I had to say, when will I see the first house in that area? That's
obviously the next question. We've got any ideas as when it's going to start?
I think the end of next year. If I was being a little bit ambitious, I think by the end of next year, probably more likely by, let's say, June 2025, I'd say pretty definitely there'll be at least a house there.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a good starting point anyway.
So it's happening.
Now, speaking of developments and all things happening here in Dubbo from the point of view of different areas that are developing different precincts, there's the Blueridge precinct, which has been developing quite nicely up there in East Dubbo. There's bit of a bypass sort of a road that council have been engaging in wanting to get started as well, which is going to link, I suggest, the Mitchell Highway, swing around the back of Blueridge, coming down towards Boundary Road, I think is where it's going to sort of head off to. So are we any closer getting started on this? Is this getting pretty close now? So
this one's a step behind where the last topic we just spoke about is at.
Okay.
This is now a development control plan for the Blueridge precinct for public exhibition. So this one will go out for public exhibition. And the same concept as we talked about before with residential, this is all about the Blueridge area. That's the Blueridge precinct, if you like, and that's talking about small and large-scale commercial and industrial uses. There's a few things about this. This is, again, that same concept, developing the master plan, the development control plan to guide developers there.
So it's bigger than just the bypass road, isn't it, really? You're talking here more than that.
We are talking more than that, but that's an important part of it. So when you're doing a DCP, you do have the basic structure of what it will look like, including the roads. Now, in this scenario, where nominating that this particular road from Mitchell Highway that feeds through into Sheraton Road, part of that southern distributor area, we're saying that this is an important part of that. So that road needs to be a little bit larger. That road corridor needs to be a bit larger because there'll be more traffic, heavier traffic, higher volumes of traffic on that road. So this is all part of it. The interesting part here is that you'll sometimes get a DCP being developed by council that has lots of developers on board in that area. Or sometimes no developers will be on board, but you need that DCP to move forward. This one has got 3 main developers that are involved in it. 2 of those are absolutely on board, want to see it go ahead, keen to see that road through the middle, keen to get it all tidied up because they understand the importance of that. The third landowner there is not so much excited by all of this.
Is this where that whole idea of compulsory acquisition is going to come in?
It may.
Potentially?
It may well do. So the DCP, the planning for the DCP, that can all happen and that guides that particular developer in terms of what will happen, looking at that DCP across those 3 sites, how they'll all link together and work together. But it doesn't matter if that developer doesn't develop that for 20 years and the other 2 developers on either side work on that. But sometimes you need some connectivity through an area. And so that major distributor road, that southern distributor road, would be one that, yes, absolutely part of our plan and makes more sense. There's no point coming off the Mitchell Highway, coming to a dead end. The whole idea is to link that through. So we'll keep talking to that particular owner, that particular developer, about the DCP in general. I'm sure they'll make a submission to the draft exhibition that we'll have, or the draft that we have on exhibition. But ultimately, if everything else fails, we may have to enact compulsory acquisition. We may have to say we need that corridor because we need to move forward with the development of this whole area and get that traffic, as you know, away from schools, first of all going through Blueridge and going onto this southern distributor. So we may have to go down that path. We hope not. We'd always prefer to talk to people and come to some sort of agreement, but we'll see how we progress there.
Now, just quickly here, Matt, last Sunday you went out and farewell. We talked about it in the last podcast, but it all happened there last Sunday. The Minokamo farewell to the students out there. They'd be well and truly settled in now to Japan. How'd the farewell go?
Really good.
Yeah.
And I love talking to the students. They're all so keen and they're so attentive. So 10 students there. There's actually a lot of the schools represented. I think every high school in Dubbo apart from Mags was represented. So that was really positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I sat there and I talked to them about the importance of being ambassadors and representing Dubbo across in Minokamo. And they really hung off every word. A really big job in front of the chaperones. So you've got 2 chaperones, husband and wife team. And I did say to the students, while you're away, your mum and dad now are the chaperones. So pretend when your chaperones speak, that's your mum and dad speaking, assuming that you do what your mum and dad say. You're not ignoring mum and dad. But that's a huge responsibility.
Oh, absolutely.
Parents handed over 10 children and they said to the chaperones, here are my children, please look after them for 2 weeks and bring them back safely in one piece. That is a big responsibility. I think they'll have a wonderful time. I haven't actually heard any reports back yet. I haven't seen any photos yet.
No news is good news. I always sort of say that could be the case.
Yeah, you're spot on there. So normally I expect to see a few photos, but I'll probably get some of those next week.
Because the age of these kids are roughly, 15 to 17 or something, are they? Or
yeah, I think you've got to be a minimum of 15 years of age to go in the program.
For a good reason, I'd say. You've got to be emotionally mature enough to deal with 2 weeks away without mum and dad.
Spot on there, and typically, not always, but around about sort of year 10 level is where they're at. So maybe year 9, but probably around year 9, year 10. So good group of students, and there's a fairly exhaustive selection process to go through. So those kids did well to be selected there. I did tell them they were the best of the best, so they like that idea.
There they go. They'd love to hear that sort of stuff.
That's right. And we'll hear more from them. They'll actually come and do a formal presentation at council.
Oh, good. So there's some follow-up sort of stuff they'll have
exactly
before
right.
they come
back. And normally at those formal presentations we see lots of photos.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I like this one, Matt. This is very, very exciting. As you know, you and I have been known to tread the boards occasionally. Wouldn't say our singing's anything special, but I think we enjoy the whole notion of getting up there on the stage occasionally in life. And the DRTCC, this is very exciting because they've been given $1 million here to upgrade their lighting system. Now, this is very exciting because I know you were talking to me about this earlier. Some of these movable heads and things like that, they're bringing in this LED lighting, which is just the way the world is moving right now. And the accessibility and variety and different ideas you can do with LED lighting is exceptional. So $1 million grant to the DRTCC for lighting. Talk us through it. What are we looking at here?
It was actually $1,000,000 and $560, more than $1 million. We can
$560 more. Well, there's at least another light.
And of course, with that kind of money, we bought 45 Ayrton Diablos, 42 Pro lights, 20 Pro lights, Fresnel, 12 GLP, X5 IP bars
Jeez,
installed.
you know your lights. Look at that. You're just rattling that off memory.
No
You're not
idea.
even looking at your notes with that either. You're just rattling these notes straight off.
No idea what I've just said.
Oh, look, I can tell you, I know a little bit about LED lighting from the point of view of theatre, and most of those what we call movable heads. So these are the things that move around, and it's sort of, and of course with LED you can change the colours without using the old gel strips back in the old days. Get the old park hands up and flip the old gel strips over. We need red light here, we need a blue light there. These LEDs do all this for us.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about in regards to some of the cool things that some of these lights can do. So one of them was in regards to having a spot that'll follow a person on stage without actually having a spot operator.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
This is
isn't it?
cool. This is cool.
And so one of them, and it was actually used in the Dubbo Theatre Company production of Jesus Christ Superstar.
Was it really?
That's right. So and no one would have noticed it because the spots work so well.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the main actors in that, they put a little radio beacon just underneath their shirt.
Yeah.
And then the spotlight sitting up the back where the spotlights normally sit, where an operator would normally sit.
Right.
The spots actually, and in fact, I don't know used up there. They might have been used from above the ones actually just above the audience rather than right at the back.
Right.
But then automatically, as that actor moves around on stage, that radio beacon is tracked by the spot and the spot follows. And I knew
That is
the
so
technology
cool.
was there, and I was
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
taking note during Jesus Christ Superstar, and I went, wow, that's good, because being a spotlighter, which I know you've done,
Yes,
is a
yes.
challenge.
Absolutely it is.
Trying to
Yeah, yeah.
actually keep an eye on where that particular actor is, which way they're going to move next.
Yeah.
This is just done automatically. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You can even do better than that. And some of the experts were telling me when the official launch was on this week that you probably need 2 of the radio beacons to make it work in this particular way, one on the front, one on the back. But you can actually have lights from above, movable heads, as you said, having spots come from above and from in front as you move around, so you're getting double light, which
Wow.
obviously is much better.
Yes.
But just the rest of them, they did a bit of a demo for us when we did the launch. And again, all those lights that I've just rattled off, I won't rattle off all those fancy names again. and so all those
I can
lights.
test your memory on it. See how you go. Now, there's a Fresnel there. You mentioned one of those. Anything
There
else?
was one of those. They just showed a demonstration, and as you said, you can change colour. There was a mixing deck, just like you would have an audio mixing deck, a mixing deck there that was done for the lights on a computer screen, where you can change a whole range of things, run a program. People come on for different scenes, they can just automatically light it up. Obviously, the flexibility there is incredible. Change the light colours. There were different patterns you could
I was
change.
going to say
there.
they'll do different patterns, different
Patterns.
shapes. That's
Yeah.
the beautiful thing of these things.
Quite
do.
fantastic.
Intelligent
and,
lighting.
And again, all of these different heads moving around.
Yeah.
Even in the past, you used to have people physically go up high, so creates a
Yes.
bit of a risk for people.
WH&S factor there, yes.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to have people go up and move these things around manually, no more. In fact, the lights we had in there, when we replaced some lights many years ago, we put some second-hand ones in because we couldn't afford the brand new ones. So these ones obviously are brand new. It's amazing what you can do with technology. $1 million seems like a lot of money, but when you look at the display and what they can do with it, again, we've talked about the theatre being so great to attract international acts.
Yep.
But it's also great at exposing our local productions, whether it be dance, whether it be Dubbo Theatre Company, drama, whatever it might be, being able to have all of this technology there to basically show off all the talents in the best possible way.
Well, I'd suggest the fact that it's not just the scenario right there now. It's not just going to be as good as anything you want to see nationally. This is going to be world-class stuff. Like, you're going to put $1 million worth of this intelligent lighting into there. Any theatre in the world would love to have access to that type of stuff.
You are absolutely spot on. And already some other theatres have started talking to our staff at this theatre, asking them about that. How's it working? How well is it going? Just programming the whole light show in for a show that would actually run more or less automatically. And on top of all of that, LED, good for power consumption as well, because you think about the number of lights that are there, it's chewing up a fair bit of power with all those lights on.
That's right.
So again, our theatre is fantastic. It is a major tourist attraction. Over 30% of the tickets we sell are outside 2830. So great production capabilities, I suppose, there.
Yes.
And I think once people learn that it's there and learn how to take full advantage of it, even better. I think the next thing we need to do now is probably upgrade some of the audio. The mixing deck, for example, that was put in when we first put the theatre in, so that's going back to 2010.
Yes, things have definitely moved on since those days, I'm afraid. Yeah.
13 years' time. Again, we don't have the money for that at the moment. We'll keep looking out for money in different grants and see what we can get there, but you could easily spend another $500,000 or more on new audio in there. No one complains about the audio, but I think you could probably enhance it even further.
Oh, it's just so wonderful to hear. I've been thinking, probably trying to put a bit of a time frame on this. Maybe around about 6 months ago, we discussed the notion of that Dubbo's about to get whole new bus routes. These whole new bus routes in different spots around the city where different pickups are going to be and all those type of things and different destinations. Well, 6 months has elapsed and it looks as though it's all about to happen. So are we about to get new bus routes in Dubbo?
We are indeed. This is part of the 16 regional cities bus rollout program. And I spoke at the launch. We had the Honourable Jenny Aitchison, MP, the Minister for Regional Transport and Roads, at the launch here in Dubbo. And I spoke at the launch and I said, growing up in Dubbo, and even now, you got to different places by car, by bike or by foot. That was really
that's
your
pretty
options.
much it. That's right, yes.
I don't think... It doesn't come to front of mind if I, for example, had my car in to replace the tyres on it and I haven't got access to my car for a day. I'd probably get my bike out. I might walk places. It doesn't come to the front of mind to go, why don't you go and get on a bus? And that's probably because the bus routes in Dubbo aren't good enough or haven't been good enough in the past to give me reliable access to buses in areas where I know I can get on and off conveniently. And there's no doubt about it that if you lived in Dubbo, in fact, if you lived in most regional locations, you're severely hampered if you don't have a car. If you're relying on other people to get you around or walking or riding, especially as Dubbo grows, it might have been okay when Dubbo was a bit smaller, but now you go as far as Keswick, you go west, we're developing a lot along Mayoral Road there. It's starting to grow more and more. So if I lived in Keswick and I had a friend that lived over near the golf course, come over and visit me, I don't have a car, well, it's a bit of a challenge to get there. It's a fair way to go. So this rollout across, again, 16 regional cities, I think is a good move. I think the numbers will be low to begin with. I think the usage will be low, but I'm convinced the state government is going to stick with this because they'll be subsidising it initially. They're going to stick with this, hopefully, till people get used to the idea that there are buses they can catch in a convenient way.
So I suppose two questions in regards to that. Are we going to see more bus routes established? And secondly, are we going to see more buses on the road?
We will see more buses on the road, and there are more bus routes. You can go and look online and see where those various bus routes are. There's more bus stops. We've talked about that before. So, yes, you'll have more flexibility and options around that, and you might see more people using buses. And it almost feels like Dubbo's growing up a bit as a city, the fact that we're going to have public transport. Because when you and I were growing up, public transport wasn't a thing you did. You caught it to school. Maybe I used to ride my bike to school, but many people caught a bus to school, but it wasn't something you thought of. Whereas in Sydney, if you're going to visit someone, it's just, I'm catching public transport. It's buses or it's trains. It's a normal reaction to get from A to B in Sydney, but it's not in a regional location.
Volunteers. Something that, again, you and I have done a lot of over the years, volunteering. During the week, there were some awards given out to some of our locals for their volunteering efforts by an organisation. Not quite sure who the organisation is. You might be able to help clarify that a bit for us. But just in general, Matt, do you have any stats in regards to what the volunteer numbers are like here in Dubbo? Are we increasing our volunteer uptake or are we going backwards?
Well, one of the things I've always been proud of is that the volunteering rate in Dubbo has been higher than both the state average and the national average.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is great.
Is that based on a bit of hearsay or is that based on some
this
statistical
is out
evidence?
of the census. And I'll give you that in a minute, but I'll just...
from the census, okay. So that's genuine.
I'll answer your first question first, which is that the award ceremony that I was at was the New South Wales Volunteer of the Year Awards, and it's a program run by the Centre for Volunteering. So that's a peak body for volunteering in New South Wales. And it's always good to go along to an awards event like this because you just get to see people that are doing some great things.
So there's a couple of local people got awards?
Well, it was the Orana region, this particular one. So there were some Dubbo people that won awards, but also around the whole region.
Yeah, nice.
But I did actually mention at the ceremony, I had to deliver a short speech there. I did deliver at the ceremony and say that we do very well in Dubbo, and I knew it was slightly wider than Dubbo, so I actually looked at the Dubbo electorate rather than just the Dubbo city. Obviously, Dubbo city makes up the majority of that electorate. Dubbo and Wellington, I think, make up 50% of the electorate, which then includes Narromine and Mudgee as well. But it has gone down. So I had good news and bad news for everyone in the room. I said Dubbo still leads New South Wales and Australia in volunteering.
Yep.
But it has gone down.
So again, based on what, census figures?
Yeah, so I looked at the last 3 census figures. Now, our listeners can't see this, but I've got a little graph that I can show you there.
Oh, it's a very pretty graph, by the way, listeners. I can tell you. There's a blue line, there's a silver line, and there's an orange line, and it looks like someone sitting there with a knee, and it's sitting downwards. So I'm assuming that's a situation where people, that also says volunteering rates of people aged over 15, and I have to tell you, it's all going down.
Well, it is going down. Dubbo's still on top, though.
Yes, Blue's on top. That's us.
If I give you a bit of an idea, back in the 2011 census, the volunteering rate for people in the Dubbo electorate was 22%.
22%?
Yeah.
Okay. What year was that, sorry?
That was in the 2011 census.
Okay, yep.
By the 2021 census, 10 years later, that volunteering rate for the Dubbo electorate was down to 15%.
Yeah, right. Okay, so
it's dropped.
That's
but having said
figure
that,
its own right.
If I look at New South Wales and I look at Australia, in 2011 it was 16.9% for New South Wales, 17.8% for Australia. So again, both lower than the 22% for Dubbo.
Yeah.
And then in 2021, it was in New South Wales 13%, in Australia 14.1%, again both lower than the 15% for Dubbo. So it has gone down. And I did pose a question on my social media sites the other day. I actually posted that graph and actually said volunteering rates have gone down. Do you know why? Can you guess why?
Yeah.
And some people suggested COVID might have had a little bit to do with it. Having said that, 2021, when you answer the question in the census, it talked about your volunteering in the last year. So it might have been impacted by COVID. Maybe people feel like they're busier now. I'm not sure the exact reason why. I still like the fact that Dubbo is higher than the state or the nation. And that says to me we've got a good, strong community, a community that's focused on good outcomes for fellow citizens. But I would love to get it back up to around that 22%.
Because it's such an important part of the community, isn't it? To have the community volunteers. So many of the operations that we've spoken about on many occasions, they need the volunteers there to make these organisations run.
You are absolutely spot on. And we did a calculation years ago. We did a calculation that said, what would it cost council if we had to pay all the people that volunteered just for council?
Oh, okay.
Forget about overall. What would it be for council? Now, this is back in Dubbo's City Council days, and it was several $100,000. If we just used a base $10 per hour, which obviously you can't pay people that smaller rate now, but if you said $10 an hour, it ended up being somewhere in the vicinity of about $500,000.
Wow, there you go.
For the cost. So I did say to groups of volunteers back at a function where I revealed that figure, I said that would be the equivalent of a several % rate rise. So next time anyone in this room is out there talking to friends, maybe having coffee, get them to pay for the coffee because you've just saved them a several % rate rise.
Do you reckon there's anything that we could do possibly as a council to help improve and to raise these figures again?
It's a good question. I think I'd want to know why the figures have dropped first before I could say I've got a solution to put in place. We can encourage people to volunteer. We can encourage people to get involved in volunteering. But I really want to understand that why. It may have been COVID. The next census might be back up to normal.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because the next census in 2026, hopefully we're well and truly past any COVID hangover.
Yeah. Maybe
this is a bit of a blip, but I just think it'd be... I really want to know why. I really don't understand why. I don't know that answer yet.
Al, the Dubbo Workplace Hub. Now, this has been something that we have discussed, and I remember the last time we discussed this, both you and I were very, very disappointed by what we had read from the state government news release on this in regards to the nature of this hub. But I'm reading here, Matt, that there might be a bit of a change and a potential. There's been some update that's happened here in regards to this. So, again, let's just update the listeners. What is this Dubbo Workplace Hub? And secondly, has there been a change again to potentially what we're going to see here?
So the Workplace Hub, I'm going to go way back to 2013.
Okay.
There was
when volunteer numbers were really going well.
That's right. There was a decentralisation task force. I actually presented to the task force, and there was a report that came out. One of the options that I put to that task force was an option that I called a CATO, a Combined Agency Teleworker Office. Don't move whole departments to regional areas. Move people from departments that want to go regionally to regional areas.
Like a decentralisation sort of thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, the logic I put forward then was that if I can sit in front of a computer and have a telephone, whether I'm sitting at 52 Martin Place in Sydney or I'm sitting in Carrington Avenue in Dubbo, I can still do my job because so much of that is relying on me having a computer and a telephone. If I'm paid the same wage in Sydney working for a government department as I'm in Dubbo, then I'm way better off because cost of living, cost of housing is better, the commute time is better, so lots of advantages there.
So this was 10 years ago you proposed this.
That's right.
Right.
And in addition to that, there's a magic little line that goes through somewhere east of Dubbo.
Right.
And when a government employee is working past that line, I don't know if it's every government department, but certainly a majority that I know of, if you go past that line, you get an extra week of holidays.
Do you now?
Yeah.
Does that apply to teaching?
Well, if you're a government teacher, no, because you get enough holidays already.
You say that.
I don't know. I know it applies to things like police. I know it
Yes.
applies to things like government employees in some of these government departments. Okay. It may apply with different awards, but essentially, here I am sitting in Martin Place. I'm earning my X dollars per year, paying for some ridiculous multi-million-dollar house. I've got to commute 45 minutes or an hour to work each day. Someone says, hey, would you like to move out to Dubbo, get the same wage, have housing costs less, have a 5-minute commute to work, and by the way, we'll give you an extra week's holiday.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want to jump at
Absolutely.
that? It sounds fantastic.
I'm with you.
So that was back in 2013. The recommendation came forward, and not much happened with it until we had a pandemic, and people realised they could
do
work
this.
remotely. So they started working remotely from home in Sydney, and then people realised they could work from home remotely. So in May this year, it was announced by the state government, and work had been done by the previous government, that the government office block in Carrington Avenue was going to be transformed in what they called a workplace hub.
Yep.
There was somewhere around 26 different government sites in Dubbo where they were basically, you might have had a small building with a few government employees in there. And the whole idea of this was to remove all of those sites, or most of those sites. There might have been some that had specific needs, but most of those sites around Dubbo, put them into one workplace hub. That building in Carrington Avenue was going to be demolished.
Yep.
A new building, bigger and better, 700 employees, fantastic, happy days.
Sounded perfect. Sounded great. I love the idea. But then they turned around and said that's not going to be the case.
That's right. The plans were approved back in May, and they said, we're going out to tender. They'd allocated $48 million in their budget to go to tender with that.
Yep.
They went out to tender, and we saw, so from May to August, another announcement came out that said, actually, you know what?
Sorry,
it's
guys.
a bit dear. Tenders came in a bit too expensive. We're going to just do a bit of a refurb on this, and they were cutting back the number of employee numbers quite dramatically.
Yeah, that's right. And that was the big thing, wasn't it? Both you and I were very concerned about, but the number of 700 suddenly got slashed back to 400 or something. I can't think exactly what the number was, but it was significantly less than the initial figure.
Yeah, exactly right. And one of the things that made it a bit confusing for everyone was they didn't then talk about exactly how many jobs had been slashed back to. They did talk about 440 jobs would be supported during construction, but that's nice. But you want people there long term. During construction is only a minor part. That's a little sugar hit, but you want it long term. And so we talked about it. We talked about the numbers being dropped. That's a bit disappointing because it made sense. And if I put on my regional cities New South Wales hat for a second, at regional cities, in meetings there with our 15 cities and various ministers, we'd actually said, this is a really good thing. You're doing it in Coffs Harbour, you're doing it in Dubbo. Please keep rolling it out across all the regional cities. We love the idea.
Yep.
I was talking to a media outlet one day when I found out about this, and I actually said it's a bit disappointing, and I don't like having conversations with anyone via the media, in particular ministers via the media. So I did say on that interview that I would certainly send off a letter to the two ministers that I thought were the most relevant ministers, Minister Camper and Minister Moriarty, Tara Moriarty.
One was for
Steve Camper.
infrastructure New South Wales, wasn't it, or something like that?
One was our Minister for Regional New South Wales and West New South Wales. The other one, Minister for Lands and Property. So that was Steve Camper in this particular scenario. So that went off a letter, and I did the right thing and said, here's my disappointment with what's happening, and here's where I think this could continue to go, and I'd love to see you change your decision. I didn't really expect a decision change to come, but I thought that's my job to represent the views of the community on that. Now, I got a letter back from Minister Camper, very nice, and went through and explained that things were happening, and the budget had actually been increased to $58 million.
Oh, so the initial figure was $48 million.
Yep.
They turned around and said, no, we need to sort of cut all this back. And now they've come back and said it's actually 58 million. So they've increased the figure.
But the tenders came in a lot dearer.
Right.
So the 58 million still didn't cover the tender. That was to cover the refurb of the building. So I took that and went, well, I sent a letter off, that's fine. In the letter, it actually said, if you want to discuss this further, here's a government employee that's basically managing this whole project. So that government employee happened to be in town this week.
Yeah, right.
Let's have a discussion. Again, I know he doesn't have the power to change the decision. That was really the minister's decision.
Yeah.
Could they find any extra money to go ahead with the original plan? Yes, no, maybe. No was the answer, so they had to continue on with the refurb idea. So I did say that, yes, I'd sent off the letter. He'd already seen the letter and went through and talked about it. And then he said to me, well, we are still going to house the original number of employees. And I went,
what?
Well, hold on, I don't understand this.
So wait a minute. So are they going back to the 700 now?
They were never changing from the 700.
Well, why did they say that then at the start?
Well, this is the thing. This particular employee said that in the information that was fed through various departments, various media teams, by the time it got out to the public, the information about the number of employees being retained had been stripped out. I'm guessing here that maybe it won't be 700, maybe it'll be 698, maybe it'll be very close to 700.
So they're worried about putting a set figure down or something, were they?
That's my guess.
Okay.
Because I went, well, this is fantastic news. The whole point was that we wanted all those employees. We wanted the other sites around Dubbo to be consolidated. We wanted people to be attracted to move to Dubbo from their job in Metro Sydney and say, I'm going to keep doing that job from Dubbo. So it's a good news story in terms of it hasn't changed the number of employees. Yeah. Sure, we'd like it to be a knockdown building and build again, but whatever, that's your decision to make.
So they're going to refurb now Carrington Avenue. They're going to maintain the figure of around about that 700. And they're going to move all the departments into the one building to create this central hub. Is that a fair enough assessment of what they're still going to do?
It's still going to be the Dubbo Workplace Hub,
okay.
And what you've said is pretty well spot on.
Okay.
So the only change really is rather than knock it down and build it again, they're going to refurb the existing building to get the same outcomes.
And when's this going to happen?
I think they're basically doing the planning for it now. So,
right, okay.
So the planning, they'll have to put another DA in for these changes. They're looking at putting another floor on top. So in general, it's basically steaming ahead.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yes.
So I suppose down the track, we'll save for another time with the podcast, but we can talk about maybe what council's role is going to be in regards to this, for potentially maybe things like parking and I know accessibility of sites and stuff like that.
So we won't be the regulatory authority that will approve the DA. We didn't approve the last DA. That went because it was government and large enough, that went through a state significant development process, or the Western Regional Planning Panel would have been the approval or the regulatory authority that approved that. So essentially that'll happen again with the changes they'll make with this time around. So in terms of our involvement, it will be minimal, but the community involvement, fantastic. So it does show the value of just sending off that letter, having a communication with the minister.
Congratulations, well done, you got a response.
Well, got a response. It didn't change the outcome. The outcome was always going to be good, but at least we now know and understand what's happening.
Well, you clarified it at least, didn't you? That's right.
Absolutely.
It's time now for sport. I always like to sort of finish up our podcast with a last little discussion here about our sporting section. And sport this week, folks, is about the annual Medical Students versus the Hospital. I refer to them as Doctors charity cricket game. So this is a match-up where some of our medical students catch up with some of the hospital staff, and probably in particular the doctors, for a charity cricket game. So did you get a call up at number 3 to bat, or what happened?
They did actually ask me to participate in the game, and I just happened to be away on that day. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have done that. I remember filling in for some Friday night T20 games. There was a competition on a few years ago.
Were you a cricketer?
I used to be, but I'm a bit older now than I was.
Still got a bit of a off-spin bowler with a right-hand batting, sort of average of 46 or something?
Opening batsman I was, because I was very stodgy and slow, so they said you can open the batting, you're not flashy and
stodgy and slow are two words I've never would have put in a sentence with your name in front of it.
Well, conservative, I suppose,
maybe
how about that. And leg spin bowling that spun like an off-spinner.
Oh,
so
okay,
how's that
there you
sound?
go. I like a googly.
Well, I think that was my only delivery was a googly. I tell people I was a leg spinner, so they expect
you
me
didn't
to
know
spin
what you were
one way.
bowling either, sort of thing. It was all a bit random.
Well, look, sometimes I'd occasionally get someone out and they'd say, I was surprised by that delivery, and I said I was too. So,
so it's just an annual event these guys do, or?
They have been doing it as an annual event. I think, well, let's go back a step. The exciting part about this is we've got medical students here in Dubbo.
Yes.
That's something that not everyone knows. We've had the 4-year medical degree, postgrad medical degree that Sydney University has had year 3 and year 4 students in Dubbo for over 2 decades now. But we also started 2 years ago taking in the whole 4-year medical degree. So we've now got the students that are at second year, 24 students at first year, 24 students at second year.
So exciting, isn't it?
It is.
We've got all these medical students here in town.
So in 2 more years, we'll end up with 96 students across the 4 years here in Dubbo.
Yeah.
But they're trying to get more involved in the community. I've been encouraging them. There's a few things that I've done in the past.
Yep.
I do a few things with them to try and encourage them to get out there. I just want people to know in Dubbo that we've got university students at CSU and at the University of Sydney.
That are doing medicine.
Well, they're not all doing medicine. CSU students aren't, obviously.
No, but in this case,
University
we're
of Sydney,
talking about that, right, yes.
In 2 years' time, those numbers will build up to 96 doing medicine. Fantastic.
Yeah,
We've got some research projects we're going on that we talked about last week. We've also got CSU students studying a range of different things. So I want people to know that we've got those students out there, which was fantastic. They do this match as a fundraiser for Macquarie Homestay.
Oh, that's nice.
And again, this year, 14th of October again, I happen to be away that day, but 14th of October, the day of the referendum, so it's a nice, easy day to remember.
Yeah. Oh, so it hasn't actually happened yet? It's
it's coming up.
Right.
6 p.m. on the 14th of October.
Yep.
And they're trying
Number
to
one oval?
Number one oval, yeah. They're trying to work
there
out
you go.
ways to get more people involved. I'd love to see lots of spectators down there.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is technically the medical students versus hospital staff, but it ends up being the medical students versus the doctors.
Yes.
So these are people that are trying to be mentors to them, trying to guide them through their medical degree, but then...
Marking their assignments possibly as well. They might have to sort of think about, okay, no, he's not out, sir. I'm not going to appeal for that one.
I want to take this catch or maybe just drop
That's
this
right.
catch.
Oh, sorry, dropped it.
So it's a good event, and these sort of little things that start off as a little fun event, in 20 or 30 years' time, it'll be, the traditional grudge match.
Yeah,
It'll be something that
great.
will certainly develop further and further. But I think they're looking at ways, and I had a meeting with a couple of students, and I stole a term off them. They're going to metify the event, because they were talking to me about different ideas.
Metify
The event.
Ooh, okay.
And it talked about ideas of how we might bring more people from the community in and get them involved as spectators. And I talked about the idea of, well, take advantage of what you've got. Your unique selling proposition in this scenario is you've got a bunch of medical students, a bunch of doctors involved. How can you do things that might attract people? Can you do some free checkups, free blood pressure checkup or whatever?
Have a bit of fun with it. That's right.
And that's right. And so one of the students said, we could metify the event. I went, I'm going to steal that term now because I love the idea.
I still have
of
no idea what metifying means, but anyway.
Well, I think
What
it
does
was
that
just nothing
Boosting
in particular. Taking what you might do and adding a medical twist to it would be the definition.
Medify, as in
Medify.
M-E-D. Oh,
yeah,
okay,
medify.
yes. Medify it.
Yeah,
Oh, right, yes.
yeah.
Okay.
So again, when the medical student said it, I think it was just a term of, well, how can we add a medical twist to this?
Yes,
so
yes.
let's take that as the
makes
definition.
perfect sense. What a great idea. I love
so
it.
I like it. So that'll happen on the 14th of October. You'll have voted in the referendum that day.
Yep.
You'll be keen to do something that night, and 6 p.m. on that day or that night, there'll be something there happening, and there'll be lots of things, activities around it. They're also the students are trying to get family members to come along on that day from wherever they might live in Australia.
Yeah.
So one of the students I talked to lives in WA, so he's trying to get his parents and family across from WA for that weekend, show Dubbo off. So again, these little traditions will start to grow and grow.
Yes. That's how it happens. Well, mate, another big program for our 50th. So it's time, of course, for the Limerick of the Week.
So many things to talk about, but I couldn't help myself around the next year, Mayor again, council, lots of fun, amazing things that we'll look at and try and make a difference with. So encapsulating all that in Limerick, this is what it sounds like.
Excellent. Fire away.
Dubbo's Mayor and Deputy are very keen to continue the work on building the dream. Councillors will lend a hand to deliver a region that is grand, and next year voters will decide if we stay on the scene.
Nice work. Again, I think you've nailed it very, very well. Well, my friend, you've done wonderfully well to get the mayoral job for another term, so congratulations again on that. Congratulations on our 50th podcast. We'll crack open the cake now and get into it. Everyone out there, have a wonderful week. Until next week, take care.
Straight from the mayor's mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.